We'll just see what happens. We'll make it up as we go. We're live, and I'm not even going to acknowledge it yet. So that's the ticket. So, hey, ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, it's a Thursday, 7 Mountain. It's the Mattriarchy. We have a dearth of Matts on today's show, just myself, but that's okay. I've got Dan Sacharow of the Mythoverse and Douglas Ernst of very many things, including my favorite comic of 2019, Soul Finder.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm not biased or anything at all.
That's a fair statement.
Thanks for summon. I mean, and Dan, that's not to say that I didn't like Adobe Kroger. I did, but I like Soul Finder more.
I can't say that I blame you. After having had a look at it, I think that's absolutely a fair statement.
Yeah, it's so good. So
well, now the pressure's on for the next one. So there might be a lot of people that are like, "Oh man, he's got the sophomore jinx or whatever it's called."
Well, here's the thing, though, right? Total side note, and this might even sound like I'm pandering, but the bottom line on this is that Matt Weldon's stuff is like looking so damn good. The stuff you've sprinkled on Twitter, oh my god.
Yeah, he's been having a blast. So if your artist is happy, then that's more than half the battle, probably. So,
especially, I mean, like Matt's worked with a lot of people, but Matt's worked with some of, I think Bill Williams is one of the best writers, like in monthly comics right now. Like his Punchline is so good. I don't know if either of you guys read Punchline, but it's so good.
I know that I ordered basically when they had their Kickstarter campaigns, what is like the hardcovers or whatever. Yeah. So, and I backed them both on They did Kickstarter and Indiegogo, if I'm not mistaken. So I was definitely supporting the heck out of them just to make sure I got those. So as soon as they arrive, I'll be up to speed.
Oh man, I love it. It's probably my second favorite superhero universe right now. So, and it's actually really funny too. I've had Bill on to talk about stuff, and he and I have very different views about building a universe. And you might relate to this, Dan. This is off topic, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's my show, and I don't know that anyone's here yet. But that's okay. Anyway, he likes to keep it really loosey goosey, right? With like the deep lore. He's like, I just want to be able to tell the stories I want to tell, and I want to make sure that I'm not going to run into a lot of conflicts. So I want to keep it simple, and I want to keep it light and fun. And I'm like, that's awesome, and it's great to read that. But man, when I build a universe, man, I go all the way down to the foundations, right? And if I didn't start at the foundation, I immediately start mining and finding out where the bottom is.
That's fair. I'm sort of the opposite. Like my stories tend to be fairly intimate, character-driven moments. But they are set in a wider world that we discover as the character discovers it. So I may discover details along with the character as the story goes along in a lot of cases, but I don't completely wing it. I do have a very basic but very solid idea of where I want the world to be and what state I want to be in, and the events that shape the world as it is. But for the most part, I focus primarily on the character moments, or I try to.
Yeah, and I think in story to story, that's a really good way to go about it. I do like to listen to Chuck Dixon talk about the difference between plot-driven stories and character-driven stories. And Chuck is like my, I don't know, in terms of like living legends, right?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of legends, I don't use that term lightly, but like Carroll Shelby was a legend, and Dixon is a legend.
Yeah, and I've stolen a lot from the passing associations I've had with people that know Chuck Dixon. So my one of the guys I had on last week, Mike Hutchison, is a long-term prominent member of the old Dixonverse forums, and was and has like known Chuck for a lot of years. casually. It's not like they go out for coffee or stuff, but internet acquaintances for a lot of years. And so Mike used to be my editor at Fanzine 20 years ago. So I've gotten to hear a number of secondhand stories. And of course, Chuck's doing his Ask Chuck Dixon series on YouTube right now. And spilling all kinds of tasty beans all over the place. It's amazing. Anyway, we didn't come here to study the hagiography of Chuck Dixon. That's just one of my hobbies, I guess you could say. Actually, I have been wanting to get Doug back on for a while, and I reached out to Doug a few weeks ago, and I was like, "Hey, Doug, can you make it in X number of weeks because I have a blank spot and it's been a while, right? You want to come, please?" And Doug says, "Sure." And I said, "We'll come up with something. We'll find something to talk about." And I was really wanting to have him come on last week when we were talking about the history of comic books and fandom and all that kind of stuff, because you got a lot of your start in this world as a reviewer, and I thought that would be a really good thing, but you couldn't make it, and that's cool. So we kind of put you on here, but I didn't have anything to talk about. And about the same time, I'm thinking it's been a while since I had Dan Sacharow on too. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great to have Dan on sometime? And I reached out to you, Dan, and you said sure. And so all of a sudden, I have a show and no topic. So Doug Ernst says, "What about the 7 deadly sins and crowdfunding?" And I said, "Ooh." I thought that sounds like a perfect theme. So I thought we might as well just go ahead and run with that. And I had all these schemes today at work, and you guys know because we talked about this backstage, but it's mildly interesting enough that I'm going to tell the story again. I had this idea going through my head today as I was doing my job and I was going to get a graphic of the 7 deadly sins of man from the Captain Marvel Fawcett comics. And I was going to put it up here on the little share screen thing. But Dan and Doug just watched me spend 5 minutes failing at making it work right to my specifications. So, no, we're not doing that today. We're just going to talk about it. And I'm sorry, you guys tuning in the audience or catching us on replay. You're going to have to pretend that I know what I'm doing or mock me in your own way. Either way is fine.
You see, this is how much integrity Matt has. He didn't have to mention that, but he did.
We weren't going to throw you under the bus, man.
Dude, yeah. I like having credit for a good idea, even if I fail in the application of it all. I like somebody say, "Hey, that would have been really good if you weren't so lame." I can admit to that. So, but yeah, so. I think it's Timotei Best has joined us in the chat. Thanks for coming along with that. So, before we dig into the topic, why don't you guys take the floor a little bit and kind of tell everybody else kind of what you're doing, what things are going on, and what people can expect from you outside of this show.
Sure, Doug, want to go first?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was waiting for you, but yeah, I'll quickly go by because Matt already mentioned the Soul Finder deal. So yeah, I'm the author of Soul Finder Demons Match, and Timothy Lim did the first one with us. Colors by Brett R. Smith, cover by Dave Dorman. Matt Weldon is doing the second one, Soul Finder Black Tide. Brett Smith is still on. Dave Dorman's been working on the cover on Dave's Dugout on Facebook the past couple days. I think he's going to finish up tomorrow. I work for the Washington Times, and I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, so you can find me all over the place. So that's the abridged version.
I am Dan Sacharow. I'm head of the Mythoverse Shared Comic Universe, a little indie group of creators that have put out 3 comics in the past year, and we have just completed a crowdfund for the first of our issue 2s, that being Mythics by Matt Tritt and Beth Varney. And up next is issue 2 for Changeling, which is going to be crowdfunding in a couple of months. And after that is my own book, Adobe Kroger, Dame Commander, issue 2. And that's about 20 pages in so far. And this is going to be a nice sized volume. Because one of the biggest pieces of feedback I received from the first issue was that it was too short and ended on a cliffhanger. So I'm trying to remedy that. So that's what we got going on right now. We have a fairly active Discord. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We have a Facebook group. So much like Doug, we're all over the place.
And I tell you, I really did enjoy Dame Commander.
Thank you very much.
I really did like it. The action is really good. Oh my goodness. And the art. Leandro, am I saying his name right?
Yes. I actually had to ask him how to pronounce his last name because I was going to start introducing him on streams, and I completely had the wrong idea.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to try his last name. I'll be completely honest. I'm willing to embarrass myself, but there are places I won't go.
Yeah, fortunately, he was understanding. His name is Leandro Panganaban, and he's from the Philippines. And yes, he is an absolute beast with his pen. And to Doug's point that he mentioned, like it's a good sign that your artist is enjoying working on your book. Leandro just gave me like a sketch of Adobe he just did for the fun of it this morning, and that was a very pleasant surprise because I hadn't asked him to do it. He just said I was bored, so I did this. Yeah. And he really enjoys the character. He enjoys working on the book, and I'm very blessed to have him on the team. That's
a good sign right there, man. I'll tell you.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And yeah, so we got a lot coming down this year. We got on our Patreon. We are releasing short comics that were written by Matt, Brett, and I, and are being penciled, inked, and colored and lettered by artists in our community on our Discord. Yeah, we're kind of using that as a vehicle to give these up and coming artists like some real projects to really try out their chops.
Man, I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it just sort of happened organically because what happened was we had one of these artists do a short story that Matt Trin had written for a free anthology called Corona Kings that was put out to give people something to read during the quarantine. And I liked the look of that. And then he did a follow-up one for Matt about a young Althea Fletcher. That's the main character of Mythics. And I was so impressed with how far his art had come that I said, I have to get you a script. And he was really enthusiastic. And he's going to be doing a 22-page one-shot Adobe Kroger story that will be available through our Patreon in print and digital.
Yeah, I have to be completely honest, and this is going to sound like sour grapes probably, but like you are pulling off something that like me and the guys wanted to launch like a decade ago and didn't have the resources to pull off. Finding artists that were looking for projects and finding a way to pay them. We just never had the resources, time, and like social media was a little different beast a decade ago. Crowdfunding was just barely getting started, and I had young children who are now, old teenagers. That's how long it's been. But I'm so, and like what you guys, some of the things the Wicked guys are doing are like so many of these ideas that were bubbling in the back of my head that I had no way of making happen. I see other people doing it, and I'm like, well, that's awesome for you.
Yeah, that might be a good place to segue over into our 7 deadly sins discussion.
Right? Okay. So I did not prepare, and this was the thing. Like I said, I was going to have the 7 deadly sins of man on screen so that I could have an easy cheat sheet for things we talked about, and it would be a fun visual aid, and it's about comics because I love comics. But I couldn't make that happen. So I'm going to depend on Dan and Doug to do the thing that I couldn't do for myself. Although, if you do go over to Twitter, I did use that photo in the ad that I just talked about us being live. So I didn't get some use out of it.
Awesome. Before we start, I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be on with Doug because I've been a fan of his videos since 2017. I've been watching them ever since. And I've always admired just how much of a rock he is. Like how steady his principles have always remained throughout everything. And I was really, really happy to see him come out with a book of his own. And it was just so good. So really glad to be on with you, Doug.
Thanks, man. And it's great to meet you as well. And it's nice to hear that. And maybe I'll explain it to you backstage, but it's been a very trying week for numerous reasons. But I have tried my best to stay principled, even when people don't understand why I make the decisions that I'm making. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's like the problem that like principled philosophical people face is that, they have to be able to shrug off disapproval.
Well, and I think something that people don't realize is that there are different kinds of principles and there are different roles in the world.
Sure.
Right? This is something that I've talked with number one Marmaduke fan about repeatedly, and Matt Croft and some of the other guys who really try to look at the how does our philosophy affect our actions, affect the whole thing. And some people are fighters, right? And they're built to get dirty, right? And that's me. I mean, you guys know me. I don't pull punches, and I'm not afraid to say what I think. And if somebody gets offended by it, then I also don't care. I just want to be honest and accurate. And I can't take time to care about your feelings because there are bigger issues at play. And some people are built that way. And I don't need anyone's approval. I have 30 people that watch my show, and if nobody watched it, I'd probably still do it. But that's okay. I'm not out there to get public approval. That's me. And I don't think anybody does. Public approval isn't the big thing, either the thing. But there are some people that are built to go low. There's some people that are built to stand, to stand against oncoming the hordes, right? But there's some people that need to be that paragon, that need to be that shining city on a hill. And I think if there's anybody in our little pocket of the comics community that does that, it's Doug Ernst.
And for like long before most other people were doing it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
well, I'm the first one to say I'm a very flawed person, but I try my best to live up to the principles that I espoused on the blog for years, and then obviously on YouTube. But there are times where it just gets stressful because you don't want to let people down, and like you just if you care about people and you're making decisions and they don't understand why you're doing them, and they might even think you're the bad guy when you're trying to live up to a certain ideal, and it's just like stressful. We'll just put it that way. So yeah, I really appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. And once again, this is not to stroke your ego, Doug. So don't get big head. We all know that you're going to fail eventually, but even with that, I think you'll have the honesty to admit that you're going for something bigger than yourself, and you're wanting to hold up an example to say this is the standard. This over here is the standard, and that's what I'm shooting for, rather than holding yourself up as flawless. So
yeah, well, no one's flawless. We're all fallen here.
Oh yeah.
I will try my best to avoid the sin of pride.
Yeah. So that's a good place to start since we've already brought it up.
Yeah, and it's usually listed first too.
Yeah, well, it is, and I actually think there's a reason for that. But what do you guys think? Do you want to talk about why the 7 deadly sins are the 7 deadly sins before we talk about how it relates to comic making? Because I think that would be a fruitful conversation, but I didn't prepare as well as I should have. So the one thing I do know is that some of the idea for the title came from a passage in Proverbs, right? And that's Proverbs 6:16-19. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Right? That's from the NIV. And that is, of course, not exactly the template that we have in the West and in popular culture. But the idea that these are things that feed the negative parts of our demeanor. And I don't really know how the 7 deadly sins were formalized. Do either of you guys know that?
I would have to defer to Doug if he could answer that question as to where they originated from.
I would, if this was a test and there was like an exact answer that I had to have, I would not be able to answer. But if there was an essay, I don't want to say I could fake it, but I could come up with a good guesstimate of maybe how things. So I mean, pride I mean, that's Satan's. That's like every other sin kind of. It's like a domino effect comes off of pride. So you could use that in terms of like the tree branches or the bad fruit of pride, and then you can think of the temptations that we all face on the while in our earthly life is the world, the flesh, and the devil, and then you could think of all the ways that you are tempted and how they all incorporate it into the world, the flesh, and the devil. And so some of them are just sort of like natural outgrowths of pride. So whether it's lust, again, that goes to the flesh that you're tempted with. Gluttony is the same way. Greed could be like the world and the devil simultaneously. Sloth, anger, envy. You could all work these into, again, the different temptations. So... yeah, I could go on. I could just keep going on and on forever. But I mean, I think again, it all goes back to the fall of Satan and then the fall of man. So,
well, and in a lot of ways, the different things, and we'll talk. Maybe talk about each of them in turn. But I really think that C.S. Lewis was on the money with something. He mentioned both in Screwtape Letters and in Mere Christianity that most of the sins and vices people have are they're good desires, they're good drives, they're things that are beneficial for human flourishing that are twisted.
Correct. Very correct.
That break you down because they become the focus, or because we think that can define us in a way that is unhealthy. And I think that's one of the when you look at kind of the chain of those sorts of things, that one can lead to another, I think that's very true. And so let's go ahead actually and talk in kind of reverse order. And
the one thing that I will note is you have the 7 deadly sins, but then you have the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, and you have the 3 theological virtues as well, which is faith, hope, and charity. So, like as you were saying, sins are really just a sort of negation or some sort of like a cavity that forms in virtue. And anyway, so
well, C.S. Lewis said it, where he said, like, if you make any one of these principles your sole focus, there is nothing that would make a devil out of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's very more or less what Doug just said. There are cavities in virtue.
Well, and I think one of the things that this is kind of a different take on it. I'm not quite sure it's philosophy of it, but in modern Western thought, we like to forget that the universe was made as one thing, right? And so, nothing we do exists in a vacuum. It's all part of one creation. It's all part of one aspect. And so we either can align with the way things ought to be, or we can try to invent a way we think things ought to be, right? We can accept the definition of how things ought to be, or like, we ought to love each other, we ought to be honest, or we can develop, a new definition that always ends up with somebody getting screwed over. I mean, the terror in France is Twitless says sins are 2 for the price of 1 then. That's true. But like the terror in France or the White Revolution in Russia are all about people trying to force their version of goodness while ignoring the structure of the way things work together. And I don't want to get too into the weeds of history and politics, because everybody knows I can, but I think that's something to think about, that it's all many of our sins are things that are not that they're bad. It's that they're out of, not to use the two of the Greek golden mean idea, but that they're out of balance, that they're taken out of their proper station.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity had a very apt metaphor that I think explains it, where he explains like all these urges we have are keys on a piano, and the knowledge to know when to play those keys that's like that is morality, because every one of those keys is correct to play at one point and wrong at another point.
Mm-hmm.
Like lust is typically something we want to avoid, but a married man may want to encourage that with regard to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So every one of these urges are good at some times and bad at the other. Like you said, there's a balance, there's a temperance,
and we can dig into them in specifics in a moment, right? So before we go on to talk, do we want to take it like, I guess, who wants to throw one out? Do we want to just like, because I did find a list while we were chatting, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. It seems like ending with pride would be appropriate to me.
Okay.
Does that work, guys?
Well, all right, then I'll, if I may, I'll go ahead and jump in with envy, because of that sour grape statement you made. I think it's a good segue. Okay, so with regard to envy in general, I think that it can be very easy to look at successful people in general and become, envious of their accomplishments, because all that you're really seeing at that point in time is their current success, but you're not seeing all the thousands of hours and failures and frustrations that led them to that success. And that, with regard to crowdfunding, you can see, like, let's look at the Icarus and the Sun by Gabriel Piccolo. Phenomenally successful Indiegogo campaign, made almost $600,000. And he appeared to come out of nowhere if you didn't know who he was. And like, who is this guy? Why does he get to make $600,000? but if you go over to his Instagram account, he has almost 3 million followers. And that's not trivial to build up. And he posts hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images regularly. And he's built his community over the course of many years to the point where he gets engagements in the hundreds of thousands on his posts on Instagram. So he has worked very hard and he has earned his success. But if you just see his one campaign, you're like, well, he can do it. Why can't I? And then you go and give it a shot and you either fail or don't even crack $2,000. And you're thinking to yourself, why does he get to make the money and not me? My art's just as good as his, but he put in the work. He took the time, and it took him years to get where he was. It was the same thing with Richard Meyer, but he didn't launch his campaign until he had built his community over the course of a year and a half.
Well, and that wasn't even his first campaign. He did others too.
He did that were not as successful, but his successful campaign came as a result of him finding an audience that he connected with and regularly engaged with every single day, sometimes multiple times, and he earned it.
I think one of the things is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Christian rock musician Steven Taylor, but there's a song he has called Cash Cow. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but one of the most telling lines in that song is that the idea that one of the great failings is of humankind is the idea that I deserve better. Right?
Yeah, that's a poisonous mindset.
It is, and of course, pride is the root of that idea, but that idea is envy, right? And so it's one of those things where, I've been, and this is, and I joke about it. I was kind of joking about it earlier because there is a bit of frustration. I've been doing comics online since 2006, right? And we have yet to find a really good core audience, and that's okay. Maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe we're not good. Who knows? But when Chris and I started the thing back in 2005 and we're starting planning our universe and the whole works, we thought for sure we had a 5-year plan that did not pan out. Right?
Yeah.
And so like some of the ideas that we had and the things we wanted to implement were things that were really good ideas, and somebody else like yourself struck on them, right? We had been talking about looking at newsprint paper too, newsprint printing too, but we could never have the market for it. I found out Alternatives was doing that kind of stuff, and I thought, hey, good for them. They found the idea that was floating around in the ether. Good for them, right? Especially if they can make it work, that's awesome. And so I think it's really cool when people find that. but it's also one of those things where like that part of me that just says that, yeah, that, maybe it's the hipster impulse. I don't know. Like, I had that idea before that idea could possibly work because,
Yeah. To be fair,
I do think it's something that a lot of people do get the idea that they let that become a controlling aspect in their life, and they get bitter over it instead of just realizing that, sometimes life is made up of successes, right? And sometimes it's made up of failures, and probably more failures than not.
And many more failures than not. It's paralyzing to get into that mindset because, there was this old show called Parker Lewis Can't Lose in the 90s. And one of the lines that always stuck with me was they were making fun of the wise janitor trope. So it was a janitor that said this. And he said, life's a wonderful thing, but it's like a roller coaster. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, but you're never either one for very long. And I was very young when I heard that. And I thought it was profound at the time because I was young. But it's kind of the truth. You fail your way to success, and you need to look at failure as an opportunity to learn what you did wrong, as an opportunity to find the success. It's like you didn't do it wrong; you just found a way of not doing it right, and then you got to find the way to do it right.
Well, and I think another aspect of it too, when it comes to the idea of envy, is that longing for something somebody else has is also the idea about like that those people don't deserve it. It's one thing to say, hey, look, that was an amazing idea, or that was a great thing. I'd like to have a similar success. It's a lot different. Sorry, Twitless. This guy, he's I gotta break off from my point because I've totally lost my train of thought, guys. Twitless is the writer of the webcomic Super Schooled, which has almost exactly the same premise as my webcomic Forces Good and Evil. And it's I don't think it's better, but it is easier to digest. So take that for what it's worth. But with it, the guy is hilarious, and so he shows up in my channel when I don't have him on as a guest. When he's on as a guest, he's a perfect guest. But when he's not a guest, he shows up in my chat and says hilarious things and distracts me entirely.
Shame.
So, and he just takes pleasure in watching me giggle while I'm trying to act like I'm saying something profound. Okay. The other thing about envy was that envy is sort of like the shadow cousin of contentedness, right? And that's one thing that I enjoy.
What did I miss?
Oh, Twitless says, I'm very guilty of plagiarism. Which sin is that?
Depends who you ask, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. Hey, dadgummit, what was it? Oh, contentedness. That's the thing I was talking about.
I'll keep that in mind in case you get derailed again. I'll just say contentedness.
Right. And one of the things that's come up on the channel here a lot is the idea that if you're making comics just to be successful, if it's not about the passion for the art form, if it's not a passion about the story, if you wouldn't do it even if you weren't getting paid, then you're just wasting everyone's time, right? Because you're wasting your time. You're just hoping for a payout. It doesn't matter. And I can honestly say that because of my lack of success, that I would still do this even if I wasn't successful, because I'm not. Right? So.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we three at the Mythoverse, we weren't getting paid. We made these books and we took a huge risk. We invested in the books and then we said, hey, does anyone want this? And but we probably would have done it anyway. I mean, I had already written an Adobe Kroger novel at that point, and I wanted her story in some form or other to be completed, whether or not anyone chose to pay me to do it. It was just something that I wasn't going to be able to rest until I finished.
Yeah, and I felt the same way about our universe. When we first developed it, we took a couple of little stories, put them together, and I've been so compelled by that. it's pulled me along for 15 years, right? So yeah, so I totally get that. So Doug, any thoughts on envy?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you guys covered everything. I would just say it's good to look at successful campaigns and try and learn lessons from, what did they do right? But yeah, it's definitely a bad idea to just focus too much on what other people are doing. You really just gotta, so for like our books, it's like I'm writing it in a way where I would want to buy this in the store. And I don't know if other people are going to like it or not, but I'm just first and foremost trying to tell a good story that I would like. If I was a kid, I'd be like, this is awesome or whatever. And then it's like, yeah, I hope other people like it. But yeah, when people are looking at the dollar signs of the guy next to them and saying like, well, why did that guy make, like $60,000? Why did that guy make $200,000? And why am I only making $15,000 or whatever the heck it is? And it's just like, you're asking yourself the wrong questions. Well, I guess it depends on what your goals are, but if you're doing it from this place of you're just like upset at the guy next to you, then you're kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Yep.
Yeah, very well said.
And one of the big things I think people like lose track of, especially because those of us who they're passion projects, but we also want to make a living on it, right? It'd be great to, right? I mean, nobody at this table is making a living off their art, but would it be great if we could, right?
Yeah.
Although I don't know, I don't know if you would even want that, Doug. I think you'd feel like it was a constraint on purity or something. I don't know. I'm kidding.
Well, to that point, it is kind of freeing to not have to rely on your art to make a living, because then you really do have a lot more freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can't remember the heck I was going to say. Oh, but I think that it's no, wait. I was making a joke and then I lost track of my point. Oh, well.
Did I do that? I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. We have Neostars in the chat, and he says that he does need to get his book out there. I encourage you, definitely let people see it, and let it get it out there. I think it's an important thing. Just finishing a project is super important.
Yeah, we've been encouraging Neo for a while. I really want to see him complete his project.
I want to have him on the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I found out that the reason he's in the chat often is he listens between things at work, and so he works the shift, and so he can't come on. So, which I encourage listening to podcasts at work, so that's great. But at the same time, I really want to. He's got some crazy good ideas, and I'd love to hear more about it. Plumb the depths. So if that's an issue, Neo, why don't we just arrange to do like a pre-recorded show? Yeah. Whenever you're available, I would love to have you. Yeah. So that would be fun. But anyhow. I think I'd actually mention the contentedness part, Twitless, because my idea about that was that, like, are you doing it for the art or are you doing it for the fame? Are you doing it for the money, or are you doing it because you believe in it? So, yeah. So, but yeah. So that was my point with the envy thing, because you can't begrudge somebody else's success, because I mean that's what, and a lot of times that's what they've earned through one shape or another. And I know sometimes it can be really frustrating if you see a project that obviously, or that you feel doesn't look like the work's really been put into it. It is wildly successful for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean, different people have different values. And so so the people that support a project that you don't think is worthy obviously have a different value structure than you do. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not for you.
Right. And bear in mind, this person you're envious of, probably there's something about you that they would be envious of. You never know.
That's true. Yeah. I do have a pretty decent head of hair. So a lot of people are fairly jealous of my hair.
Yeah, I could never grow my hair like yours because it just curls up too quickly.
Yeah, I have the perfect amount of curl for hair that the length I keep it. So, anyway, so that was envy. Let's pick another one. So,
how about greed?
greed. Greed
Yeah.
greed is a good thing from envy. Doug, start us off.
Sure. I would say greed. I would say, can we do gluttony next? Because they're kind of tied together in my mind, which I could explain. But I would say for greed, don't overpromise and then underdeliver. So sometimes with campaigns, they're like, if I just keep putting more tiers on and more tiers, I'll get, they're promising more things on the front end, but they don't even know if they could deliver on the back end. So it's like your desire to, and that ties into the other campaigns, like, okay, well, if I just offer this many tiers and this many variant covers and whatever the heck it is, and I got this toy and whatever the heck it is, then I'll be able to break 50,000 or 100,000. And it's like, you're thinking about the dollar amount. You're not thinking about what you could actually deliver on. And again, all these things, when you commit these sins, you're setting yourself up for a serious downfall. If there's a high probability of it, if you commit these particular sins.
Well, and I think when it comes to greed, one of the things that really comes to the idea of greed, of avarice, is wanting more for yourself than you need, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So the one of the things that it comes to with that is the idea that I think a lot of that comes into comic projects, into crowdfunding, in under delivering, right? And not just in terms of overpromising, which I think is an important aspect of it. Can you really fulfill, right? What's the cost to fulfill the things you promised? But I think also the idea that there have been campaigns that have actually under promised, don't really want to name names, but hey, here's a 60-page book that is 32 pages of splash pages, right? That are just that are just repeated 3 times. But so with and don't check my math, it's wrong. But I mean, things like that, right? Where in order to whatever, right? In order to feed that greed, that desire for consumption, I guess that's a little more gluttony on that part of it. But to gather in what you need, you're not providing the necessary promised services out. And
very well said, Doug and Matt. I would only add overpromising could also be called like overambition. And I think the best example of what Doug's talking about is Mighty Number 9 back from 2015, if you're familiar. This was a campaign that was launched by one of the folks that worked on the Mega Man series for Capcom, and he was essentially reimagining a Mega Man game as a new IP. And he asked for $900,000, and he ended up with like almost $4 million, and it was a complete and utter disaster. Largely due in part, I think, to what Doug was talking about overpromising. As he made more money, he kept literally saying, okay, now it's going to be on this platform, and now it's going to be on that platform, and now it's going to be 5 new levels, and now there's going to be a new boss level, and eventually it just got to the point where it's like, okay, now we're delayed, and oh, by the way, here's another Kickstarter by the same company.
Well, and I think that's a trap that people have especially over the last couple of years really fallen into, extra additional content inside and everything else, because you can afford to do that now. But think of all the time that adds on, right?
Exactly, precisely. And that's like, and all these stretch goals that you add on, like you just said, you are not just getting more money, you're getting more that you have to produce and deliver, more work, and that takes time. So if you're like saying, hey, we're going to put 5 new levels in this game, did you talk to your developers about that? Like, how long is that going to take? Are you going to be able to meet your initially promised goal, or etc. You can go on. Yeah. But that was very, very well put.
Yeah. Side note, Nicholas Mueller, yes, Mighty Number 9 did come out. In fact, I could have bought it last October at Dollar General here in Scottsbluff, but I didn't because my son, who loves Mega Man, had no interest in playing it. So
Yeah.
It's available. It's out there. You can probably get it for $5. Some people like it okay, but a lot of hardcore Mega Man people badmouth it incessantly. So
yeah, it did not live up to its promises.
Yeah.
The tech demo that he sold the game with, it does not resemble it at all. So it was just a huge disappointment. And if he hadn't gone through all this like we said, over promising and being a little too over ambitious, things may have been different. But yeah, that's just when I point to greed, that's usually my go-to because that was just a prime example of it.
And for those of you guys who are tuning in, I just want to say that we are intentionally not trying to name comic book campaigns because we don't want to badmouth people. We're talking about concepts.
Precisely.
So if we mention details out there, you want to put the pieces together and say I'm a jerk, that's fine because I am in fact a jerk. It's a well-known fact. Don't pretend I didn't say this openly. Just that. Yeah, anyway.
Like every campaign, even like our own, I know what I could have done better or what, where I've sinned when it comes to the Soul Finder campaign in terms of delivery or my expectations versus what I delivered or whatever. But I'm not going to typically go out there and start offering up all of them for people. But I know, our team knows internally how we need to do better. So when we're talking about these concepts, like you said, it's like everybody's guilty of, nobody's run a perfect campaign. If there's a perfect campaign out there, I'd like to see it.
I've got a personal story to share about Sloth, though, so we'll deal with that in a moment. But let's go to Gluttony.
Okay. Yeah, like Doug said, that does tie in pretty closely to greed. I was having a hard time splitting the two up into two separate concepts for this discussion. But the tack that I decided I wanted to take is that gluttony usually means that you're overindulging in food or drink, but it can also mean like you're overindulging in luxury items for the purposes of gaining more social status. Mm-hmm. So the way that I might correlate this to a crowdfund is throughout the course of your campaign, are you budgeting in the best way to ensure that you are going to be able to promptly fulfill all of your promised rewards, or are you being needlessly indulgent with those funds? Are you taking a chance to take a little bit of that stretch goal money and buy yourself that 3D printer you've been wanting, or are you investing it back into your project to provide the best service?
And then the other thing too is the idea of purchasing this equipment actually going to help, right?
Exactly.
I will mention one specific campaign on that front, right? What George Alexopoulos did with his self-publishing, right? He got really good results. And he's doing it, he's making them all by hand. It's super. It is the artisanal comic, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a noble use. He I think in a lot of ways overperformed what was promised, and I think that's something that a lot of people have come back for, and with his follow-up projects. So I point him as a positive example of something that I don't believe qualifies as a gluttony thing. He's actually building value to his customers for that campaign and for the future.
Yeah, he works really hard. I have to hand that to him.
One other element of gluttony, I don't know if this would kind of fit in or not, but just from a storytelling perspective, I think sometimes people try and fit way too much into a single issue, and it's like they're paranoid that maybe they're not going to get a second issue, or who knows what. Maybe if it's like a team book or something along those lines, and you're just trying to pack too much into too few pages, and then like the story suffers, where it's like, okay, you got all the stuff that's going on, but you didn't leave any room to make us actually care about any of these characters. So packing too much into the book itself could blow back on you as well.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take, not something that I'd really thought of in terms of the topic. I was thinking about the production side of it, right? But the idea about the actual story that just, that's a really I like it. I like it, Doug.
Yeah, that's actually a very good way of putting it, because like like for example, like he said, are you simply providing us with, like, let's say a whole bunch of backstory about a character we don't care about yet, and then just giving us more backstory about a character we don't care about yet, and then finally giving us like 4 or 5 pages of actual story? No,
And
I'm not referencing any particular book.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, also the concern about what's best meeting the needs of the customer, right?
Exactly.
I mean, think back to this whole thing, right? Go back to 2017, go back to 2016, this whole, whatever we want to call it, right? Even back farther, the idea of it was that many modern comics, mainstream comics creators were not servicing the needs of the clients, right? Of the customers. They were out there, trying to fish for their own glory, make their own mark in the world, trying to tell their version of Watchmen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to tell legitimate hero stories, talking about that Western narrative, talking about what, that American story, right? Because I think those are all connected ideas that make comics applicable. Hang on. Somebody's trying to mow their lawn next door or something. It's almost dark here. Why are you? It doesn't.
Well, to be fair, it is in the middle of summer, so I usually wait till it's late to mow my lawn too, but not this late.
Yeah. Actually, Star Storyteller in the chat says writing their own fanfics. Yes.
And worse, they're self-insert fanfics.
Oh, what? Yes, absolutely. I don't want to get into that, but it's 100% true. But yeah. So the idea about, as indie creators, are we really meeting the needs of our customers? That for some of us, I've talked to a lot of people that got into writing comics or wanting to draw comics, or they always liked drawing and decided to take it to the next level because they felt like they were getting schlock from the mainstream. They went to the comic shop, they came away disappointed and said, you know what, I can do better. That's personally, that's not my story, because I've been wanting to make comics since I was like 11.
Yeah, I've been drawing sequential art since I was 3. But, obviously I didn't end up being the artist this time around. But I've always had that same desire to tell a story visually.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and I think that's the idea is, are we really meeting the needs of our customers, or are we just feeding our egos? Or are we using are we just cramming so much in that we're forcing it down their throats, right? So Interesting take on Gluttony. I like it.
Definitely.
So let's go ahead and talk Sloth, because I brought it up earlier, right? And I'll just, since I brought it up, I'll go ahead and start. Sloth is a huge problem in the heart of man, right? And I think it's a huge problem for modern man, because there are so many distractions. There are so many things to keep us from noticing that we're being slothful, because we can be really busy on social media. We can be really busy watching the Netflix or whatever. We can be really busy playing the video games, and all of these things that we do can feel like they're something that we're doing when they're really just something we're consuming. Right? So it can keep us from acting, and I think it gives us an excuse to think that we're not acting, and so we're not producing anything. I know as a creator, I need to write a lot more, right? And that's my personal story. We did a crowdfund last fall, and we're behind schedule on it, and there are some legitimate reasons for it, but some of the less than legitimate reasons for it are that I have final draft dialogue edits that aren't complete yet. That's not holding us back entirely, but that's not cool, right? And so I there are other things that have come up in the whole works and things, but there really honestly is not a day that goes by that I'm not burdened by the fact that we're not delivering to our customers yet. And I've sent messages out and saying, are you guys sure you don't want your money back? And nobody's replied yet, so I don't know, but yeah, it's one of those things that I'm personally guilty of, not being productive enough, not being having a little bit of sloth, so.
Sure. And to that point, I mean, I was in a similar situation. for the Mythoverse campaign in 2019, we had we fulfilled our digital rewards immediately because the books were complete, but we had a lot of issues with our printer. We went from one to another and then back to the first one, and that ended up delaying print fulfillment for a couple of months. So I was, like you, very much burdened by that and mortified that it took so long to get those print books out. But yeah, I absolutely feel you there. And yeah, so you there's another way that you can approach Sloth from where I sit with regard to crowdfunding. You're talking about post-campaign, but also during the campaign. I can't speak for everybody, but for us, crowdfunding our 3 books, it was a second full-time job for all 3 of us because we were starting more or less from scratch. We hadn't yet built an audience or a community. So we were all on social media. We were running ad campaigns on Instagram and Facebook. We were going on streams. We were talking to as many people as we could. And I would wake up in the middle of the night to check the balance. I would check the balance first thing in the morning. I'd check it before I went to bed, and there were several days where it just wasn't moving. And it was my mission, my job to make it move at least a little bit every day. And sometimes it didn't work. But yeah, we basically, Matt, Brett, and I, we lost sleep over that campaign, how hard we were working on it. And very glad that it worked out. But so I always approach a campaign like this last one we ran with Matt. It is a job. You are essentially asking all of these customers to pre-order a product sight unseen. And so you have to really hustle. And you have to treat it like a business. You have to take it seriously, or else why are you even doing it?
One of the things that I've really learned from this experience personally is that a standard I want to hold myself to and that I want to hold our team to is that the next campaign that we do, I don't want to run until we've already put the work in ahead of time as far as production goes. Right?
Absolutely.
So we had our budget, we had our page count, we thought we knew all of our benchmarks, right? We thought, okay, here's how long X, Y, and Z is going to take, and then life happened and got in the road, and then other things, right?
Sure.
And for lack of a vision, the people perish, right? But at the same time, when it came to it, is one of the things we've learned is getting it done ahead of time, so that we may talk about projects we have going on, but I don't want people's money until I know that 60 days, 90 days out, guaranteed they're getting their book, right? And that's part of the situation that we want to commit to doing better in the future. And with apologies to our first backers so much, because you didn't deserve this. But we don't want to. We want that to be in the future. So, and that's just one of the things that I've learned about, is if you do the work ahead of time and you invest that ahead of time, then you're not at the labor of that in the thing. And I think there are especially a lot of the campaigns that launched in 2018, didn't do their legwork ahead of time. And some of them are still, or in recent months have just barely come out of that, vacuum, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very well said, and that is the approach I am taking with my next campaign. The book will be complete, and I will already have a print proof in my hands before I launch it.
So, Doug, any thoughts on Sloth?
I guess I might add one more in terms of the story that you give your readers with the book. Research has always been a big thing of mine. So when the Marvel comics, when Peter Parker was like a CEO of his own company, he's like a billionaire. And I've said this before, it just ticked me off that it was like Dan Slott had never done. It seemed like he had not done any research into actual billionaires or any sort of business 101 class. And so you had this billionaire character, and it was just like he was making things up on the fly, or like whatever in his head he thinks about billionaires. And so, like, to me, that's Sloth in terms of like, just do the minimum amount of research necessary, because those little details that you put into the story, those are the things that are going to have people coming back. They're like, oh, this guy did his homework. Yeah, he's writing about billionaires, and maybe he actually read a book by Tony Robbins or what anybody, whoever the heck, Steve Jobs when he was alive or whatever. But if it looks like you're just, I don't know, like some middle school kid who's just writing whatever comes in his head, like they're not going to come back for the next campaign.
Well, and I think a really important part of that whole deal too is like when it comes to, doing due diligence and research, but also spending that time on that script, on those elements, right? I mean, especially those of us who are doing crowdfunding, those of us who are doing super indie stuff, we don't have the same kind of deadlines. We set our own deadlines. I don't think that there is an excuse to not make sure that script is just right? Not to make sure that dialogue is just right. You have time before you go into campaign for that second and that third and that fourth draft.
We were tweaking the script all the way up until right before we sent it to the printer, like all the way up, because things happen with word balloons and space, and you kind of know, but like you could still cut some fat here or there, or you just randomly tweaking things. So all the way up until right when we were sending it off, Soul Finder off to API, we were tweaking things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that really digging in and just not. I don't think there's an excuse for a creator to feel like their stuff's just good enough, right? I know artists, a lot of artists who like never stop tweaking their stuff, and so sometimes I have to put on the editor hat and be like, no, stop it. We need this. This is good enough. I'm saying it's good enough. But as the person who's doing that creation, I think it's okay to hear that voice from another person. But darn it, you still have to push yourself. Right?
Yeah, well, and that's where the virtue of prudence comes in. You got to know when to cut it off. You're like, okay, this panel's done, dude. We got to move on. Or okay, well, we could still work on this element of the script, and we have time to do that, and it's not going to throw the artist off. And so you really got to, like I said, show some prudence during the course of your campaign as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's an interesting segue. Actually, I believe it is. Let's talk lust, right? So, because I think prudence is a very good counterpoint to lust, believe it or not. So, how does lust factor into crowdfunding?
I'm just going to be facetious and say, note to all indie creators: don't spend all your initial funds on hookers and cocaine.
This is very true. So lust is of course, we typically think about lust in terms of sexuality, right, and carnal desires. But the lust of the flesh is not merely confined to the sexual.
Sure.
It is. I think that part of our psyche that derives a pleasure from stimulation, right? So I think that the lust for praise, right, that of course calls back to our innate pride, but I think there is a lust for praise that people have that can dull them to sense, right? That can cloud sound judgment, that keeps prudence at bay. That believes that they can just do no wrong because everyone's praising them, and I think that lust is a connected in there, because there was a quote that popped into my head and I can't remember it now. There's no greater liar than a prostitute. It's something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that because you take something good, right, the emotional interaction within the sexual union, and then you fake it, and that's a big part of that whole thing. So and this is one of the things, like, if I've had Doug, I've had you on, I've had Doug Tenaple on, I've had Tim Lim on, and nobody likes being told how much somebody else likes their stuff. They always get, anybody who's sincere shrinks back a little bit. Tell me, Tenaple says, tell me why you like it. Don't tell me that you like it. I don't like that. So let's talk about the substance, not about how much you like it. But I think that's a thing. I think that shows an authenticity and a humility that wants to reject that sort of shallow praise.
Because ultimately, praise can just be a form of manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So
another element of it, I would say, is when people are coming up with the stories and they're thinking about how they're going to sell the book. Sometimes, again, it all depends on your audience, but I think for the vast majority of people, you don't need to give into this desire for gratuitous violence or sex or whatever to sell your book. And I think, I don't know, it's one of those things where, so like for Soul Finder, we didn't really, it's a bunch of dudes basically. And in the second book, there's not very many women. There is that one scene.
There is a busty a witch there.
That is true. Which was actually, but the portrayal of them, they were into the occult,
right?
And they were sinful and they were evil. So in my book, it was actually portrayed as, well, you saw the lust essentially, especially in that one character or whatever. But sometimes I see campaigns and it feels to me that it was a very calculated decision where they were just like, okay, we have to have, a certain percentage of the cheesecake sort of stuff or whatever, when it's really, you kind of know the creator or you listen to them and you're like, I feel like they're almost going against their personality because they feel like if they don't do this, they're not going to meet a certain monetary goal.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's definitely, because I think that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of like cheesecake stuff.
Right.
Not that I don't find it appealing. It's because I do find it appealing, and I know that I know myself. Right. I don't necessarily need to feed or should feed less that side of my person. Right. And I think that that's the thing. But at the same time, there's a market for all kinds of stuff. I do think that there is something that is cheap when things are a stunt,
right?
Opposed to it actually servicing the story or servicing the idea of it. I think there are things that don't fit in, that people try to force just because it sells, and that panders to that lower denominator. But I also know that that people have gotten into that. So I'm not, from a larger market perspective, I don't want to necessarily be puritanical about it.
Right.
But I think that it's important that everybody realize that everybody doesn't have the same threshold. And I think that sometimes people that are past that threshold, personally still give into that threshold because they know it sells.
Right.
And then I think there are people that's just where they live. So it's a short trip, But yeah, and I think that's in terms of sexuality in comics. I think there's a real good place for it. I love one of my favorite things about A Common America was that it was sexy but not sexual, right? That it was.
Yeah, she was very wholesome.
Yeah, super wholesome. Yeah. And
she just wanted to make costumes. That was all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, she's I think that's an important aspect in modern fiction that we've left out, is the idea that things that males and females may be intrinsically sexual, but that doesn't mean it's for your gratification.
If you have the right creative team, you could work all of that in seamlessly where it makes sense, it's organic to the story, and the story itself is hopefully good. But yeah, I think some people, it's like they sacrifice the story just to shoehorn boobs in there. Hopefully I didn't your YouTube's gonna get you there. Sorry about that.
Oh, I don't know. 30 people watch my show. It's fine. So, this is an interesting little chat. And to come over the chat, Fly Fox Pro, I would never want to draw something my mom would be embarrassed to show her friends. So the worst thing is if you drew something that was embarrassing your mom didn't get and she still showed her friends. That's even worse, right? Doesn't know how inappropriate it is. So, but yeah, but I do think that. So I think that's a pretty I think I think that's all the stuff I was thinking about for lust, both the literal and the figurative. So let's see, we're gonna wrap up kind of early here. We got lust, we got gluttony, greed, sloth.
We
Anger.
We haven't gotten wrath or pride yet, though. So, okay, let's talk wrath because I wanna save pride for last.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one to end on.
So, what place does wrath have a place in crowdfunding?
Bill, if I may, I'll just offer up my thoughts here. I'm coming at it from two different angles. One's from the creative and one's from the professional. So, are you doing this to create something good, beautiful, and true? Or are you doing this to spite a person or a group you disagree with? Like, what's the basis or foundation of your work? Like, are you making a comic solely to dunk on one person? Are you making a comic because you want to tell a beautiful story that you feel that the world would benefit from having added to it? And that sort of thing. And from the professional side of it, when the things go wrong during the campaign, or something unexpected happens, like, how do you deal with it? Like let's say a backer asks you for a refund. Do you behave professional, like an adult, or do you dox them? Like like what do you do?
Don't dox your customers.
Don't dox your customers. You're making it terribly hard for all of us to maintain that trust with our customers. But yeah, that in a nutshell were my thoughts about wrath. Like,
yeah, I want to say one of my big pet peeves is outrage marketing, right?
Yeah,
and the idea about creating outrage solely for marketing. And I know that there is a place for saying, hey, look, so and so, we'll name a name on here, right? People have been out there to deplatform Doug ToNaples for 15 years, right? Because Doug says saucy things and has controversial opinions, right? And Doug points out, hey, so by the way, here's an article that somebody wrote defaming me in a dishonest fashion. That definitely comes into play. But at the same time, like, it's not necessarily a first strike. When people are out there, making a stink to begin with, right? Making a stink to start with, to try to cancel others or to try to gin up an outrage. There's something gritty, something dirty about that. And I think that I'm like looking for things to be angry about, right? As opposed to just, signing off on it and being like, well, whatever, right? I think a really good example of this is, okay, Dan, I know you hated The Last Jedi, right?
Sure. But I just don't watch it,
you're not out there. You're like, that's it. I'm going to make an anti-Last Jedi comic that will tell Kathleen Kennedy what I think of her, right?
Precisely. That was what I was saying. Like, are you making this book just to dunk on one person that you don't like, or or a group of people? Like, that's ugly.
And I think
it's weird.
I'm sorry, Doug, go ahead.
No, because having gone through the process now and knowing how much work on all these multiple levels, color work, the art, inking it, the lettering, getting it printed, the cover, all of this stuff that goes in, the logistics of delivering it. Like, why would you want to allocate that much creative energy of your life to, like you said, if you're talking about Kathleen Kennedy or something like that, like sinking it into just something to just be like, that translates Kathleen Kennedy sucks. And I'm like, I just, it's weird. I wouldn't be able to do something like that, but okay.
And one of the things that's really interesting is I think that there is a real artistic value in polemic and in satire, right? Mm-hmm. So in the same breath, we're saying, maybe don't make it personal. I'm flashing back to, My Hero Macadamia and all of the swamp creatures that are very clearly sitting U.S. senators, right? I mean, sort of, not officially. But real, right? Those are there's a polemic quality to that. There's a satirical quality to that. But if you sit there and you think that Tim Lim stays up all night hating on I can't even think of a person's name right now.
Hillary Clinton.
No,
Chuck Schumer. Nancy
Chuck
Pelosi.
Schumer was who I was trying to think of. There you go. But yeah, I mean that doesn't keep Tim awake at night, right? He's he made his joke and he's moved on, right? And that's not even to say that he doesn't agree that there's some huge corruption or that he has a huge problem with the way they've conducted themselves or whatever. But the point of the work is greater than that. It's about concepts. It's about ideas. It's about laughs.
I think you could often tell when the work is sort of guided by this sort of spirit of levity and sort of, you could tell when there's something corrosive in the artist or the writer's soul that's just like oozing off the page, and you're like, this is just an angry person or whatever, as opposed to someone who they're thinking about these big issues and there's still a sort of, I don't know, this, like I said, a merry prankster feel to what they're doing.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to say that I've never used satirical polemics within my comic. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but because that's for the deep cuts. But with that, it's a thing where I think that there is. I think you're right. I think there is a place where it's driven by levity, not by wrath.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about ginning up anger in somebody else. And I think that's the other side of it, right? When you have those sort of polemics, are they about making somebody else angry, or are they actually about bringing levity and about bringing unity to a thing, right? I think back to the some of the like the roasts of yesteryear, right? And the Rat Pack and all the nonsense that those guys bandied between each other. That was pure affection. Even if it was something that seemed like harsh, it was all about that affection. And I think we've lost something in our society where everything's got to be so serious. But at the same time, there is money in outrage. There's a lot of money in outrage.
Well, that goes back to the earlier what we were talking about in terms of not looking at the other guy and their what their final numbers and their tally. So yeah, that's fine. And, this is like a Christian audience from what I know anyway, for the most part. But it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, do you really care if someone made like $100,000 and it was all sort of, or a majority of it was, they got it through anger marketing. So it's like, yeah, okay, you made $100,000, but you also sold your soul. So I would rather make $15,000 and be in a state of grace than be rich and be in a state of, mortal sin going on.
Yeah,
well,
I would rather dig ditches than take the ticket.
Yeah, yeah, I'm 100% there. I personally, I mean, I've talked about this before. I would rather like injure myself than be beholden to somebody's poor behavior on something like that. 100%. And I mean, that's the thing is like, this goes back to something I was going to mention earlier and forgot about, was that our metric for success shouldn't be money, right? If we believe that comics are art, doing the art is the metric for success. If somebody believes in your project enough to put money down for it and you deliver that product to them and that product is satisfying, that is what success is. It's the money is one representative of that value, but giving that value is what success is.
Yeah, well, for me, I think it's one of these things where money in and of itself, I'm okay with it. If it's one metric for success, and you're thinking, okay, well, I need to be able to pay my bills, so I want to make something that's both creatively fulfilling for people, but also it allows me to keep doing this or maybe to grow on it. Then I'm okay with it. But when it becomes the sole metric for success, and there was a period of time where people are like 6 figures, blah blah blah, and like if you don't make 6 figures, you're like basically losers. Like that's where to me it's like, okay, you've warped. It's not right now. Something's not right now. So, yeah, it's a tough balance.
Yeah, it is, and I think it comes down to, you know, what is our motivation, right? And not just, you know, is it money or is it whatever? Because I think that, once again, those things are representative, which is going to tie into, you know, the last theme, right? Because I think we're there now.
Yep.
Pride, right?
Sure.
That's kind of the very bottom line of it all. Because I mean, I guess the one thing to say on, no, I think I've said everything on right. I take it back. We're at Pride. That's just where it is.
Well, the point you just made is a perfect way to segue over into what I had planned to mention about Pride.
Okay.
Because you mentioned money. It's like money represents someone's energy, time, and life. I mean, not just the time they spent earning the money, but all the time they spent being able to earn that money, all the skills they had to acquire, all the knowledge they had to learn. That's years and years represented in that money that they are putting down in your campaign. And you are never entitled to a single moment of anyone's energy, time, or life by default, regardless of how great you think you are. And it's easy to think that way once you've had a successful completed campaign, that, oh yeah, my next one it'll go just as smoothly. And we were guilty of that when we launched Mythics issue 2 earlier this year. We thought, hey, we have all these backers that are, you know, in our community and they love our work, and we'll have no problem with this next campaign. And that was not the case. We had to conclude that campaign unsuccessfully. And Matt and I had a discussion. He's like, yeah, I was sure we would get all of our old backers back because they clearly like our work, but we're not entitled to that, and we shouldn't expect it. We have to treat each campaign as though, you know, we haven't had a successful campaign before, and that this is our first one, and we have to value each and every customer for all of their support. Yep.
And I think, side note, part of that was timing.
Yeah, this is true. It was definitely a bad time to launch the campaign.
One of the ones you didn't get on that first try was me, because I didn't have the money until like 2 days after it wrapped. So that was how that was. So
yeah, we definitely put that in as a factor.
That was, but this time I had the money. So I'm very pleased.
Well, I'm very, very glad that you were able to back this time. I really appreciate it.
Last night.
Nice. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I told Matt this on Twitter yesterday, but he announced that the Kickstarter had closed, and I was like, my heart just like dropped. And I was like, no. Then I remembered it was on Indiegogo too, and I had 6 hours, and it was fine.
Yep. And the one person who has not exhibited any of this sin, I would have to say, is Matt himself, because when his first book came out, it received some criticism that gave him pause. You know, it wasn't very flattering, and so instead of saying, well, you guys just don't understand, and you're haters, he actually reworked the script for issue 1, relettered it himself, and sent out a new digital copy of the improved version to all the backers as soon as he finished it. And he sent out a letter saying, I apologize for the quality of the first issue. Our customers don't deserve that. Here it is. I've reworked it, and I hope it's an improvement. Yep. And people just absolutely ate that up. They loved his humility, his humble energy that he put into that. And he... In his first campaign didn't succeed, but he a month later he tried again with a new approach, and it worked out well for him. And I think it's his attitude throughout this whole thing has been just exemplary.
Yeah, when his revision of that script, it's interesting because your problems with printing allowed him to finesse the product.
Yes,
which was almost a divine thing. I don't know, but it came back and it was leaner and it was more concise. It was much better. I actually didn't mind the original version because I know it, as an indie guy, first book, it's got some hiccups, but I thought it carried the story fairly well, especially with the second reading. But man, he really finessed that, and it was a good move.
Yeah. So yeah, I was very proud of him, ironically enough, that he did not exhibit this pride of this sin of pride
Mm.
with regard to his own work. He just said, you know what, you're right. Let me make this better for you.
Yeah. Our language is a little clumsy with those two concepts.
Yes.
They're not really the same thing, but they have the same word.
Precisely.
But I'm not about to, find a better language either. So, but yeah, I think that the pride is the prime sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that of thinking of ourselves or are more highly than they ought to be, or out of their proper context. And that's one of those things that I think that we have a lot of blind spots to in our postmodern world. We want to reshape the world. We believe we can reshape the world to our liking and not accept that it has its own structure. It has its own shape, physical and metaphysical. We want to deny those ideas that had been deemed as self-evident in the pre-modern world, and I think that's one of the things that blinds even our subtextual philosophy, blinds us to these greater truths, and allows us to believe we can be our own gods, to put it in religious terms. And I think that's one of those things that definitely affects creators. I think that's what actually spurs on the Watchmen, mimic game that I referenced earlier. But also, I think it keeps us from wanting to serve our customers. It keeps us from wanting to deliver value. It keeps us from all of the other things that we've talked about, because it all feeds that concept of self. And that idea of placing higher priority upon, the us than everything else, right?
Sure.
And the whole, so much of the polemic that began this current incarnation of indie comics, or this particular incarnation of indie comics, was about, the need to serve the customers and to serve the needs of the customers, to serve the tastes of the customers, and it's a shame that it seems manifest that many creators have embarked upon the idea about being the show instead of being, the caretaker of the ideas for the customers, and I definitely know that, as a creator, I know that I have a story to tell. But I don't want to neglect the transaction that I'm creating for an audience, and I want my audience to be pleased with the story, not just for me to be pleased to having completed it.
Sure, very, very well said.
Doug, any thoughts on pride?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I might add is just know your weaknesses, know yourself, and be willing to ask others for help, and know that when it comes to crowdfunding, there's so many different hats that you could wear, but you don't have to wear all of them. You could delegate tasks to people. You could admit that you don't know anything about printing, and you could find somebody like in my case, a Timothy Lim, who's dealt with people and printers and all that sort of stuff, and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you teach me, please? Because I'm stupid. And if you get with the right person, they'll actually teach you stuff. And but if you try and take on everything yourself and you refuse to delegate in something that's already a collaborative process, you're going to needlessly erect obstacles for yourself when you should be finding ways to either take them down or be able to go around or over them or under them or whatever. You don't need to just charge through them.
I think it's important to realize that the idea of knowing about learning what you don't know, right? And not falling victim to the idea that you can just mount every, obstacle along the way, I think that's an important thing. It's really interesting talking to Tim too, because because he's got stories about people getting a hold of him who actively have maligned him, who say, hey,
Oh yeah.
what?
Or
do you-
people
how
that
do you-
will randomly email me and ask me questions, where it's like, I know that they've badmouthed my creative team. Like, it's like, or you go on shows where people bash my teammates, and then you come to me and ask me questions, and you expect me to like help you out, and I'm just like, okay, this is a really awkward situation I'm in. How do I figure, like, this is an interesting balancing act right now, because it's frustrating when you have to deal with stuff like that.
The frustrating thing for me about that too, right? So, like I said, I've been at this for a while. We printed our first anthology. In fact, I have a copy of our first printing. Where did I put that? Oh, I put it over there. It doesn't matter. I was going to show off.
Actually, when we're off air, I will tell you an interesting story about a backhanded comment about me that was in a crowdfunded book that I believe, and it came from somebody who, we'll just say it was one of those cases where they wanted my help with something, but it's like, no, you hang around with people that bash my team. So,
well, and this is our first published comic, right? Zen Comics #1. It's an anthology with 6 stories about characters in our universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we printed this in 2007. Okay, so all of your print sizes, all this kind of stuff. I mean, this like technology's moved a lot since then, right? In the sphere, but like a lot of the stuff that like people that I've run into who are wanting to get into creation, like the information on how to format a comics page is super available. It has been since the 90s, and there are people that never went looking and just presumed that they'd absorb it through the the ether or something. and it just makes me laugh, because it's just like, no, I mean, like, if you just humbly look for the answers, they're super easy to find a lot of that kind of stuff. And even though back when we did this, like the best printing you could get was 300 DPI pretty much. And now 600 is pretty accessible, and it's not that much more expensive. And scanner technology has gotten a ton better, and all kinds of stuff, right? But it's still something that's very, I mean, like, the answers are really easy to get, and there's no reason to be like foul about it. But there are some people that are just like super jealous because they see that other people have done the work, and like, I know that goes back to kind of the envy idea, but it still comes to that idea that I deserve better. That elevated sense of self that just drives so much bad will in things, and it's so corrosive in that, and we're all susceptible to that, right? I think that's why wrath and that outrage culture is so appealing, because we all feel that or we're all susceptible to that pride, that idea that how dare that person upset me. And I think that the even the idea of toxic fandom stems from the idea on both sides that they deserve something that they're not getting.
Right.
And that's a whole thing. But one of the things I want to kind of circle back to is much earlier, and I'm not sure if he's still here or not, but RJ from Critical Blast was here in the chat earlier, and I'm gonna try to find his post, because I think this is a very interesting discussion topic here. Kind of the inverse of everything we've been talking about. If I can find it. Okay, here we go. To successfully crowdfund, you have to take advantage of all 7 of the sins. And I think that is a definite tactic that some people have used. Because obviously lust sells. Obviously, if you can convince somebody that they're getting a lot of value for their money, right? That kind of greed, kind of gluttony thing can fit into that. People can gorge themselves on it. If you can stroke people's pride, if you can, make them good and angry, you can attach somebody's wallet to their ego pretty easily, right? But I contend that you don't have to take advantage of these sins. I think that you can do what I really think that, like, both of you guys on your campaigns did a really good job of advertising in a way that wasn't pandering, wasn't catering to those baser urges. You know, I don't think either of your campaigns fit into the beer ad theory of advertising, right? So, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree there. I mean, all I had to see was that cover for Soul Finder. I'm like, I want this book. You know, that is such a cool cover, and I love the concept of it. I mean, all I would have had to have seen was the art to sell me, and that is why I backed it. Soul Finder did not need, like, to say this book will own the libs hard, or this book will piss off SJWs, you know, whatever. You know, there was none of that. It was just like, look at this cool concept, look at this fantastic artwork, and you're in for a fun story. So yeah, it definitely can work. You just need the right people working with you. You need the right idea, and you just need to project that positivity. Like another good example of that is Cody from the Jack Irons comics verse. I mean, he's always been a very positive force, and it's not easy on him. I mean, obviously, he puts up with a lot of stuff from all sides because he tries to ride that center line. But he's all about getting you immersed in his world. He's all about getting you pulled into this story. He does a very good job of pitching the idea as like a place you'd want to be. Even though it's a terrible world, there's like this hope in it, and it's very much like Soul Finder, you know, like, why do bad things happen to good people, that kind of thing. And ultimately, there's a message of hope there, of light, you know, and there's aspirational aspects to it that really sell you. So yeah, you definitely do not need to tap the 7 deadly sins. You just have to make people care about your work.
Yeah. And one of the things, like, I'll have to be honest, like, when I found out Doug was making a comic, I was already sold, right? Spending years watching your analysis, I've talked to you about this, you know, just seeing the kinds of fiction, the kinds of thinking that you dive into, your the value statements that you make, and your dedication to narrative. I already knew that you were going to provide, and I told you this. I already knew you were going to provide a book that was like that was exactly the book that people needed to read, or a book people needed to read anyway. And I know how nervous you were about it going into it, and you thought I was being too generous, but I think that the product you presented with us it demonstrates that, especially for a first book, right? I mean, you knocked it out of the park, man.
Well, it was one of those things. I mean, I was like, okay, I want to make a statement here. And it's when you're transitioning from like blogger guy, YouTube guy to suddenly creator, people are going to be like, oh, okay, he's just trying to, you know, squeeze some money out of his subscribers and he'll be gone. It'll be one and done or whatever. So I was like, okay, well, in order to make a statement, I got to get a group of guys that are serious. And so I was blessed enough to everything just sort of came together. You talk about blessings or whatever in the, you know, the fingerprints of God on things, and, you know, meeting Tim and Tim introducing me to Brett, to Dave Dorman, to Matt Weldon. Literally Tim is like this sort of keystone almost in the project. And so when you get this sort of nucleus of, you know, dudes or whatever together, and they all have the same vision and everything is going in the same direction and everybody's giving it 110%. It was just like, okay, well, I don't, like we were talking about earlier, I don't want to let anybody down. And if my name is attached to like quote unquote OG Comicsgate or whatever, and then you come out of the gates and you just fall flat on your face, then that gives all the people that were laughing, the Dan Sloths of the world or the Mark Wades, and that they were looking from the sidelines, like, what is this? I can't wait. He's been criticizing my Spider-Man for years, and I can't wait to. So it's like, you don't want to just do it just to, you don't want to spite someone or whatever, but at the same time, you want to be a good example for others. And they're like, no, it's possible. He did it, and I could do it too. And you want to give people a blueprint for success. And they're like, and not only did he do it, but he didn't do it by tearing other people down, and so, yeah, it was just a very stressful time. And the campaign itself was like a 60-day sprint, basically. So, yeah, it was an interesting time. And so I definitely appreciate all the support that you guys have given the book.
And that's part of like I was talking about, doing that legwork ahead of time. I mean, in all of I know you weren't necessarily working on, you weren't working on Soul Finder for that 10 years you were blogging about comics, right? But you were studying the storytelling arts. You were studying the philosophy. You were studying the theology that goes into your faith, that goes into your belief about narrative, that goes into all of that. So Soul Finder was really a culmination of the things that you think that you have value in. And one of the things I love about it is it's not about Doug Ernst. It's about the things that make Doug Ernst, right? That there's something outside of you that you were expressing in it, right? And
yeah, you can psychoanalyze. If someone wants to psychoanalyze me all day, there's a lot of me in that book. That's for sure. So,
well, yeah, but what I'm saying is it's not a vanity project. It's not just like, oh, this is going to make me look amazing. I think it does demonstrate qualities that you possess, but it's about the work itself. And I think that's one of the things that it speaks really highly of. And I think the same is true of the Adobe Kroger material, both the novel, which I have listened to, and the which we still need to do that show about that, man.
Yes.
and life just gets so busy.
It sure does.
But yeah, I think both of those things are that they both speak to things that there are values and there are narratives that are beyond just the creator. And I think a lot of people do in fact make their art just about them. And somebody talked about the I can't remember who brought it up earlier, the idea of the self-inserts in books and how it's in fact
well, like we were talking about weirdly spending time on something that is just like a monument to hate of something else. But the other thing for me that I think is kind of weird, and maybe I should just interview someone like this one day, but it's like you're spending so much time and effort into something. It might take a year to bring it to fruition, but then it's the equivalent of bubble gum, like some sort of bubble gum where they chew it and then they throw it in the trash because it lost its taste and it's over. And it's like, do you want this like empty calorie, creative sugary snack that they just throw away? Like I like cookies too, I guess. But at the same time, if I'm going to put a year of my life into something with a creative team of guys and all the sort of blood, sweat, and tears that you have to go through to bring this into existence, I want to create something that someone could pull off the shelf in 5 years or 10 years and say like, wow, this holds up over time. And maybe they have a kid and they give it to their kid and say like, you need to read this because there's values instilled in this.
Yeah. And the idea that making something that's not just a moment in time. One of the cringiest things that I think we can do is we can tell stories that are so specific to a moment in time that they don't matter within 6 months, within a year.
Right.
I know that I've ribbed Tim sometimes about some of the cameos he's put into books that just, don't fit anymore because, people decided they hate each other or whatever.
It's a little time capsule though.
It is a little time capsule. And there's a merit and a benefit in that as well. Because those cameos are never like story points, typically speaking.
Right.
Although there is one in that ends up having a much darker meaning than it was intended to. So I'll leave that one for you guys in the audience. Go read all of Tim's works and see if you can guess what I'm talking about.
Yes, please give Tim money.
He's a good example of someone whose campaigns they keep building on one another, and they've gotten bigger basically like every single time. And so when you do the campaigns right, your audience will reward you. You'll be able to see that they'll stick with you. And the people that they got the lowest tier the first time around, the next time they're going to be like, no, I see that there's a more expensive tier, and maybe it's not necessarily totally my bag, but I really like this guy and I want to support this guy, and I'll back at a higher tier this time.
Well, and I think one of the things that Tim's really done, because when I first heard about Black Ops, like I was not in, right? Like I was like, that's a little too far for me. But when he and Brian Ball and Bill Williams announced the crossover with Punchline and Rags, two properties I really enjoy, I was like, okay, I got to check this out. And I picked up Magademia, and I really loved that, and so I was like, okay, I'll give this bunny book a try, and it knocked my socks off. Like it's just great concepts. It seems silly, but it's just played in a way that just has, I don't want to just say so much heart, because people think that that's like, oh, he's got a lot of heart, but it does. I mean, there's this
I don't think it would work without Mark and Tim on the same creative team. If any other creative team were doing that, it would, like you said, it wouldn't be it just wouldn't be the same. Yeah. But they know each other so well, and they've worked together for 10 years, and they're like basically on the exact same page. They're like mind meld sort of thing, that they're able to pull it off.
Yeah, and they do, but there's this vitality to it. There's this pumping engine of creative passion, of humor, of sincerity that just drives their stuff, and makes the idea about a bunny commando seem not only intriguing and engaging, but authentic. So anyway, I think that's to answer RJ's post from earlier, I definitely think that you can take that direction with it. I think there are campaigns that have demonstrated that playing to the 7 deadly sins definitely is a path to success. But like Doug said earlier, my fear, or to echo Doug's earlier, my fear is that does it play with the idea of selling one's soul. Maybe not in a true redemptive sense, but definitely in an idea about what is honor, what makes a man, and not something that personally not the way I want to do that. Although it is a good gag.
Yeah, the individuals that would sort of prey on their customers or potential customers' worst instincts, like a devil on their shoulder whispering in their ear, like they're not going to really see the 7 deadly sins as deadly to begin with. Like a lot of them are probably just, they're just finding ways to manipulate people for their own ends. And whereas guys like us are like, no, it's actually a deadly sin. Yeah. And it's of eternal importance to your soul.
Yeah. Precisely. And on top of that, if you do employ those methods, are they really supporting you for your work, or are they just supporting you for the dopamine rush of finding someone who agrees with them, or gives them something to be angry at, or gives them attention, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Are you developing fans, or are you developing addicts?
There you go. Perfect.
And I think some people don't care. Right. And I'm not, once again, I'm not trying to that's between, really, to be super religious about it, that's between them and their creator. Right. Mm-hmm. But I know I want to create fans, or if Twitless is still here, he'll get on me because he hates the word fan. Enthusiasts. But no, I want people that can find worth and value and enjoyment and edification in my silly superhero comics. I don't want people to be burdened and to be lessened and to be degraded by my silly superhero comics.
I think a lot of times people are looking for somebody else to justify their behavior. And if you could point to, so, I mean, again, human nature, we're flawed individuals. And so we're inclined to sort of do that sort of thing. So to me, if you are a writer or an artist and you're coming out with a book and you have these people that are enthusiastic about your product, you have a responsibility to behave to the best of your ability, because there are people, including even young people, who are taking cues from you. And whether you realize it or not, there are people that respect you and respect your opinion. And if you act like a total buffoon and a goon, then sometimes there's going to be people out there that will run with it and be like, well, Dan's this way. And so even if it's like on a subconscious level, like, and then they behave that way. And so it's sad to me when I see people where they underestimate the impact that they have on those around them.
Well, I think you have a situation too where I think some creators in the mainstream in the last 20 years found themselves succumbing to some of their antisocial instincts, right? A lot of creatives are not terribly social people anyway. That's why they are good at creating, because they don't have to be around people. Right?
That's a fair point.
Yeah. I've become more so with my age. I don't know what's up with that, but okay. But I think one of the things that has is you do have the positive outcome, but I think there's a certain aspect where people were applauded for bad behavior because, oh, they're standing up for themselves, which is, that's not a bad thing, but there's a positive way of standing up for yourself and your art, and then there is a negative way of standing up for yourself and your art. I'm reflected about Max Bemis, right? Who felt he had a story to tell, but when he was criticized about that story, instead of saying, look, honestly, it's going to work out, trust me, like Tom King did about the whole Batman 50 thing, I disagree with him about that, but he handled it professionally. He handled the criticism professionally.
Max Bemis?
No, Tom King.
Oh, okay. I was like,
unlike Tom King, who handled his criticism professionally until the end of his run, when everyone decided they hated it. 80 issues and didn't do that really well. But at issue 50, Tom King was very good about handling criticism. I have a story, just wait. Instead of doing that, Max Bemis got mad, told people to do horrible things to him, and decided to make certain persons villains in their story. And certain critics villains in this story. And with that, I think that there was he got plaudits for that on certain ways. And I think that fed into that whole feeling. I think it's easy for us for people to fall into that if they're not intentionally avoiding pride, right? If they're not intentionally taking their place in it. Where if you're writing for a big company, you're a custodian of a greater ethos, right? But even if you're not, if you're telling stories, right? If you're telling hero stories, you still are the custodian of a greater ethos.
Yeah, well, even like a Bemis thing, like Bemis literally turning me into a Nazi in his book or whatever. For someone like me, I think back to my criticism of him, and I watch the videos, and I think, did I handle this properly? Did I needlessly twist the knife into a guy who's obviously psychologically troubled or whatever? And am I at fault in a way? So, like, in my mind, I think of it like, okay, well, I'm going to die one day. And what happens if God shows me the way that I led someone astray and essentially am culpable in some respect for the eternal damnation of their soul? Did my YouTube videos on Max Bemis go over the line? And even though I might be annoyed that on some level that he turned me into a Nazi, am I really the bad guy? Like, did I? And so, but I think a lot of creators, they don't even ask themselves that question. It's just, I'm trying to get a laugh. I'm trying to get clicks. I'm trying to get attention. I'm trying to grow my subscriber base. I got to get 100,000 subs on YouTube so I could get that little plaque from Susan. And I don't know. So I just wish more creators would realize the responsibility that they have to shoulder as a creator.
I think that goes actually back to a big issue, right? That I think that we as a society have kind of neglected, right? Is that we don't stop to think about our place in the big picture, right? We we're individuals. We forge our own destiny. We make up our own rules, which aren't untrue things in terms of our own personal experience, right? But we a lot of times don't realize that the choices that we make do have a huge impact on the people around us.
Well, Dan said it earlier that just one line from Parker Lewis Can't Lose about life being like a roller coaster has stuck with him for decades now. And It's like, who is the writer of that line? Does that writer realize that he put something that he was like, this is just a TV show that's, sort of a spin-off of Ferris Bueller's Day Off or whatever the heck it is. And it's like, no, you actually affected this guy for the rest of his life in either a positive or negative way.
Precisely. Yeah.
Well, I don't have a whole lot else to say on that subject, honestly. I think that's a great place to kind of put a pin in that. I know we kind of did the project thing at the beginning of the show because I was not entirely put together yet. Shh. So, Dan, you guys are getting ready. The next project you're going to be releasing through the Mythoverse stuff is the Changeling Volume 2.
That's right.
And that's going to be in September. You guys are crowdfunding that? Or?
Yeah, that's when Brett plans to launch his campaign for that.
And you'll be fulfilling Mythics 2 at about the same time, yeah?
Yeah. We wanted to get the fulfillment for Mythics underway before we launched our next campaign.
I think that is a solid plan.
Mm-hmm.
You see Tim's doing that same thing with their series of books. I think that's just a smart way to go about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So... and Doug, when would you have any kind of projected day or time frame for the I don't even know the name of it.
Soulfinder Blacktide.
There you go, Blacktide.
Yeah, I don't know if you could see my screen. Oh, I don't know. I wasn't sure how I was going to work with you, but yeah. So here's Dave Dorman's. He's working on the next cover. It's not finished yet. I think he's got one more day on this one, and it'll be done. But so that's coming out later this year. Matt's basically done, and Brett R. Smith is starting the color work. Probably it's either sometime this month. It should be I don't even know what day it is here. What day is it? July 23rd. So he should be starting any day, and it depends on how fast he could color 56 pages up to his standard.
Okay. And so your plan is to launch once everything's buttoned up, yeah?
I wanted to actually print the books prior to even launching, if possible. I don't know if it'll depend on the timeline, but that's what I would really like to do. So well, awesome. That's exciting, dude. I'm telling you, like just the stuff I've seen Matt turn in. I've seen a few things from behind the curtain, but not a lot. But it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so, I can't wait for this one.
This one's a little bit differently. We were talking about whether it's character driven or plot driven, and so the first one was more of a sort of cerebral, sort of a psycho. I don't know, getting into Retter's story, Father Retter's story, and this one is about a race for a miraculous Eucharist that is at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Maryland. So it's not quite as intimate in terms of the tale that we're telling this time around. It's more of a team story.
Yeah, that's still though, man. some of the visuals, like it's gonna be. I was on board before. I'm excited now.
Yeah.
Well, now meaning like 2 months ago.
But yeah, I'll keep you updated, man. Or I'll have to show you. I'll show you off the grid. I'll show you Tim's variant cover. So,
Ooh, a variant cover, huh?
yeah, we want to. Well, Tim's helping out with the logistical stuff on this, but he's like the quote unquote soul finder family or whatever. So I wanted to make sure that he was involved, and he doesn't have time with all the books he's doing.
Yeah.
But he did have time to do a variant cover for us. So that's going to be on there.
Yeah, we've got a whole little bunny kingdom over there. I tell you what. But so okay, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and call the show. Thanks you folks for tuning in. I really appreciate that. And next week on the show, we're having Eric Hawkins of I forget the name of his book, The Zombiful World of Oz, Doug Garrett, Matt Krotz, and maybe Tonic Mole, I'm not sure, on to talk about what we're going to call the Fulfillment Shuffle. And just talking about all the hang-ups and challenges, and we're going to basically just swap ideas for a couple of hours. And I get to talk about what a failure I am. So that's fun. Since I haven't even gotten to fulfillment yet. So we're not even done with the book. Anyhow, so you catch us all online. I don't have any links in the description because I didn't get that far. But tomorrow we'll be dropping another page on our webcomic, Force of Good and Evil. Getting close to the end of Panic at the Ren Fair. That story, which is it's one of my favorites. It's like our 28th Forces story. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages for you to read for free at forcesofgoodandevil.net. And so if you're really bored, just think of all the fun reading you could have. Anyway, that's it. We're going to call it a night and catch us next week. And have a good one. Thank you guys, Dan and Doug, so much for coming on. And also, if you really want to laugh at me, Dan, I'm going to put this on the air. I could not remember your last name last week. Probably 3 minutes worth of dead air, me trying to figure it out. And all of my guests throwing out different Dans and laughing about if I was having Dan Sloth and Doug Ernst on at the same time.
That would be something I would like to see.
It was the worst 3 minutes in my show's history. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.